It smells like burning wood. I've got a 25-year-old man lying on a gurney below me, and I am there as a general surgery resident surrounded by the burn unit team standing over this young man. His clothes are burned up. We're tearing them off, and you can still see smoke emanating and rising from his burned up clothes. The young man is awake, and he's talking with us, and he's in severe pain. Well, it is my job as a general surgery resident who is in the burn unit at that time to take care of this young man. Not only to take care of him, but to take care of his family. He has a wife and a young daughter who are just outside of the room, in the waiting room, waiting to hear about what's going on with their husband and father. And this young man has burns over 90% of his body, over 95% even. And I know that the chances of him living are extremely, extremely tiny. Well, my name is Dr. Anthony Youn. I'm known as America's Holistic Plastic Surgeon, and I'm the author of the new book, Playing God, The Evolution of a Modern Surgeon. Now, you may hear stories from other doctors about patients whose lives they've saved, patients whose lives that they have changed in these amazing and beautiful ways. But what a lot of doctors don't tell you is that part of being a doctor is making mistakes. And part of being a doctor is unfortunately failing some of our patients. And these are the patients who we learn lessons from. And they say that you learn a lot more from the patients that you fail than from the patients that you save. A lot more from your mistakes than from your successes. And that's no more true than in the practice of medicine. So this is my story of this young man and how I unfortunately failed him. So I was a second-year resident in general surgery working in the burn unit. If you know about medical education, the first year of residency is your intern year, where essentially you just do busy work for a year and you learn. And the second year is when you typically then ascend to starting to really take care of patients. And we work in the hospitals, we take care of patients during the day and at night, and we're really the young doctors who are in charge of the hospitals in a lot of cases. So I was in charge of the burn unit at this time, and it was a time where I'd see patients in the day and at night. And one night when I was working there, we got a call about a young man who was in an explosion. They brought the young man in. He was a young Caucasian male, about 25 years old, with burns over 95% of his body. Basically, his entire body was burned except for part of his face and his genitalia. So we bring him in to the burn unit and we tear off his clothes. And that's where you smell that scent of that burning wood, which you know is not wood, but it's actually burning flesh. So we take everything off, we get an IV in him, we start giving him pain medications. And if you've ever worked in a burn unit, the one that I worked at, as I'm sure most burn units are filled with just the most amazing nurses and support staff. Respiratory therapists, physical therapists, just some of the cream of the crop in the medical field, taking care of these burn patients. And even though I was the doctor in charge at the time, I was literally just a lowly second-year general surgery resident. So here we are taking care of this young man, and being a surgery resident, I knew a lot about the bookwork of how to take care of patients. I knew the numbers. I knew how much fluid to resuscitate him with. One of the things that happens when people get massive burns is that they lose a lot of fluid from their body. So we have to give them a ton of fluid to make up for it. But another thing that happens is that they can have problems breathing, especially a young man with burns over 95% of his body. Now, there are two reasons why somebody who's burned like that, two main reasons why they could have problems breathing. The first reason is if they have third degree or even full thickness type burns all the way around, circumferentially around their chest, those burns can get thick and it can be hard for somebody to take deep breaths. And that's one reason why they can have a hard time breathing. Second thing is inhalation injury. When you breathe in a lot of smoke, you can damage the lungs, and your lungs start to exude fluid, and that fluid ends up getting in the way of your lungs actually getting air so that they can exchange oxygen with your bloodstream. Well, this young man was awake and he was talking with us, and I knew that his wife and his daughter were in the waiting room waiting anxiously to find out what happened to their husband, to their father. So as I was taking care of this young man, I was about to tell the support staff, let's have his wife and daughter come in so that they can see him, because I knew that the chances were really good that he was going to die. Well, right before I was able to do that, the curtain opens and whoosh, my attending surgeon walks in. And this attending surgeon basically is the doctor that's many, many rungs above me on the doctor food ladder. And he was the one in charge. And basically he pushed me off to the side and said, look, I'm in charge now. And he took one look at this young man and said, okay, let's go ahead and get him intubated. Intubated basically means putting a tube down the throat and putting him on the ventilator. Well, I knew that once this young man was on the ventilator, there was a good chance that he was never going to wake up. And he was still awake at this time. So even though I was kind of standing in the corner in the shadows at this point, because he pretty much told me, hey, you know what, I'm in charge, and move over, I really took it upon myself and I said, look, I need to stick up for this young man and his family. And I went up to the doctor and I said, excuse me, do you think that it would be the right thing for us to have him talk to his wife and daughter and to say goodbye before we sedate him and then intubate him? Because you and I both know that he's probably not going to wake up. And the surgeon thought about it for a second and he said, no, that's not the right thing to do. If we do that, they're going to lose hope. And so let's go ahead and let's keep hope alive. And so being the dutiful doctor that I was, the Asian American doctor raised by traditional Korean parents, I was taught never to question authority, that you always have to let the authority figures make these decisions and don't question them. So the dutiful resident I backed off and I said, okay. And they went ahead and intubated the patient, sedated him, and put him on the ventilator. And a few minutes later, his wife and daughter were let in after they got him all situated. And I could see as they walk in, both of them just crumble and they start crying because they can see just how bad of shape he was in. And once again, at that point, he was completely sedated. He was on the ventilator. He wasn't awake. So at that time, it really crushed me because I knew that they may have lost their chance to say goodbye for one last time, lost their chance to say, I love you, Daddy, for one last time, and he lost his chance to say the same to his wife and child. So I left that evening, that was nearing the end of my shift. I left that evening and went home. I couldn't sleep well that night, and I came back early the next morning and went straight to the burn unit. And when I got to the burn unit, his room was empty. He had died a couple hours after I had left the hospital. And my last memory of seeing him was seeing him in his darkened room with his wife and his daughter crying next to him at his side. And it was at that time that I realized that I had failed him. I had completely failed him and I had failed his family because I had had a chance, if I would have really exerted myself and said, no, doctor, we really, really need to do this. Maybe he would have acquiesced and allowed this daughter and this wife to see their husband and father for one last time alive and to say that they love each other, and to say goodbye. And I made a decision at that time that I was not going to allow this to happen again. Even though I was that dutiful Asian American doctor who never questions authority, I had to question authority now. I had to always do what was right for my patient. And if a doctor thought something differently than me and I believed differently, or I believed it was better for a patient to be treated differently than what this doctor was doing, then I would speak up for that patient. And that's what I decided at that time. So yes, I failed them, and I failed him especially, and this is something that I always remember, and I still beat myself up over it, but hopefully, once again, lessons that we learn as doctors, learning more from our failures than our successes. If you enjoyed that story, it's from my book, Playing God, The Evolution of a Modern Surgeon, and it's a book I think anybody who's interested in medicine, the practice of medicine, and what it's like to really become a modern holistic surgeon, what it's like to go through that. There's also a couple of videos here if you'd like to watch, and if you like this story, take a peek because you might like these as well.